Five, four, three, two, one. Here we are this afternoon on a lovely Thursday, couple of days into the summer. I am Joseph Rigazio, one of the principals at Talisen Construction. With me is Chris Norris, who's a
Hi, everybody.
director.
So, Joe, we're here to talk about integrated project delivery systems and what that means to really what's amounting to a critical sector of our market and great clients in the healthcare community. I guess in my experience lately, some of us have been at it longer than we care to admit, speed to market is always a big issue. Speed to market with clarity of design and constructability, pinpoint focused budget iterations, fiscal control, stakeholder integration. All these things have always been critical for all our markets. But I've found in the healthcare market where traditionally it's a 1% margin, from my understanding, that our clients work on a 1% number, that any delay, any obstruction, anything that causes a protracted opening of a facility is detrimental to that 1% margin. So speed to market becomes critical. So construction hasn't changed that much since the pyramids. Technology has advanced. But how do we put product online for our clients in a model that's a little bit outside of the typical STIP-SUM or even GMP contract construct that this old builders are about? What have you found?
You hit a bunch of the forcing functions that a lot of our clients in the healthcare space, they're racing each other. And the conversations are getting even more acute. You start seeing developers enter into the equation for speed to market. You hear the conversations from our clients about how can they get their 3, 5, 10,000 employees and clients in a local area competing on that property years ahead of what that normal process would take. And I think that's where there's a lot of talk on the integrated development delivery. I still believe, and we've had this discussion, how do you bring that constructor very early on, kind of like the GMP CM at risk, but even more so where all the key stakeholders enter in the beginning and feel like they're on the same team. That, I think, is a little bit of the nuances today, not used as much in New York, but I think with our clients in the healthcare, they're the first ones to really start talking in a concerted effort to say, how do we move forward?
Right. So, yeah, agreed. So, again, perhaps it's the New York market aura, where sometimes New York can't do or is not aware of the ability to execute projects similarly to outside of the New York market. What comes to mind automatically is design build, right? Design build is a normal option within the quiver of arrows that constructors and owners and architects and designers have outside of New York, but rare is the time that we see that. Hopefully that will change, but certainly with the integrated project delivery system, it allows us, if we communicate this properly amongst the stakeholders, the owners, the designers, and the constructors, which, as you pointed out, also include prime subcontractors. If we're all at the table early and often and asking the right questions, the pertinent questions that are typically the domain of one, the architect or the engineer, pull all that together with the constructor and the owners and the stakeholders to start that process early is certainly a huge advantage to the owner. I think you touched on it. How do we spark that? Because listen, the reality is that any system, whether it's step sum or typical design process or CM or integrated project delivery, there has to be incentive for all the players. And the incentive in my mind is certainly financial. How can that contract be constructed in such a way that the efficiencies that are inherent in an integrated project delivery system are shared by all, including the owner, obviously, but also the advantages of clarity in execution, right?
You know, and I think that's the area that needs to be sussed out. The client needs to be sophisticated and very understanding, especially of the complete team around there. Contractually, the difference when I look at these different project deliveries, if you're going to bring all the resources in the beginning, which is the intent, and you try to create a merit-based bonus to be shared by all the key stakeholders and managed by the owner needs to be sophisticated in that approach, needs to understand and have been through different approaches with different vendors so they can help corral the team and keep that team focused on the prize. You're very interested to see the architect, the contractor, the engineer, and a key trade or two that's a big portion of that critical path, let's say, all together being incentive as if they were the same company. But again, that owner needs to have that maturity and approach in order for that to happen, and that would be a pretty exciting environment.
So that's a challenge. Let's talk about that. And you and I have been through this a couple of times because we love looking at contracts. We don't stand behind a contract. We don't let a contract get in the way of our relationship. But it's the foundation of a good agreement, right? So contracting, we looked at design build and we really drilled down on that. And when we were looking at this together, yeah, clearly AIA has a beautiful integrated project delivery contract schematic. My point here is maybe it's because of, not thinking outside of the box or not willing or able on the ownership side to look at a new kind of contract approach without it being tested. I think the challenge for us is to demonstrate to our clients and the owners that, in effect, there are many projects that shadow the integrated project delivery system that we've already done, right, and accentuate the advantages to that. And obviously what comes to mind is the Limerick project that we had with Northwell, right? So it was a very traditional GMP contract. We had a great partnership with Northwell Facilities, Northwell Operations. We had a fantastic relationship with TBG and Bladicus. And because we were brought in relatively early, we were able to integrate ourselves as a real tight team without the integrated project delivery contract per se, but in practical terms, that's what we did. And what was the result? A 13-month project that was done in 8 months. A incredibly challenging found condition. You remember, it was the base contract, I think, on the facade of that beautiful building was like maybe 15% we were going to touch it. We had to rip 85% of it down and rebuild it. So here's an example where we were faced with unforeseen conditions. We already had an integrated team, and mind you, the non-adversarial aspect of the integrated project delivery system is key to all of this, right? So there was a fluidity for us to go through the design at an early stage. I think when we first stepped into the mix, what were they, 65% drawing? Yeah. Start at that point, and then when we finally got into demo, and here's another thing, the phasing, right? We'll talk about in a little bit. But when we were faced with what would have otherwise been a catastrophic found condition that would have blown out the schedule and the dollars, we were able to work as a team together with the design and the structure and get it done, excuse me, and continue the progress of the work in such a way that not only did we not blow out the schedule, we were able to dial it back. So, again, speed to market. And how do we demonstrate that to the client and convince them that this is the way to go?
So here we are. We did not have the contract. We did have a sophisticated client. And I think when we do our lessons learned and we look at that, a lot of it was the familiarity we all had with the professionals. We worked with an architect for many years prior. That project was known. We understood the intent of the client. All the key stakeholders that come around the table were coming around the table at the same time. We actually had those discussions, even at the design build, when we were talking with the architect and the engineers, and we all shrugged our shoulders and said, regardless of the contract, it's the intent of how we want to operate. That gave confidence to the owner, and the result was very positive. And we talk about that, whether it's the triangle step sum, CM at risk, constructor early on, design build, contractor owns everything, a more sophisticated integrated approach. The owner is structuring all of us together around the table and incentivizing us the same. Those are all different methods, but we all believe that you got to come early in together as key stakeholders, keep in mind the intent of the client, and if you can do that, it's going to be successful. We talk about, hey, we really want to get that contract in place to do it officially. I smile a bit. That may take time, but in practicality, that's kind of the things that we've been doing in all the projects now. And I think that's really, and you've been saying that a lot, Chris. Regardless, you want to bring to bear the value and you want to work collaboratively, and that's going to result in a positive experience for all.
Exactly, right? So, from Talisen's perspective, and I'm really proud of our approach with that, is that, our cultural muscle memory with our project managers is if there's ever a change in approach or thought process to the project or the client based on the type of project it is, that's a no-go for us. We won't accept, well, we're going to approach it this way if it's a STIP sum, or we're going to do it this way if it's a CM or a GMP. That's anathema to us.
Yes.
And I'm very happy that that's the environment that we put forward. I do want to bounce back because I don't want to minimize some of the other advantages to this integrated project delivery concept. So again, going back to speed to market, let's just paint the picture of the typical, GMP. So you're introduced, typically I'd say 65–70% drawings, and you work with the designer and all that stuff. You go through the iterations. Getting involved so much earlier allows the team, and in particular, the architect, the engineer, and I do want to mention that Vladikis was a fantastic partner in the Lindbrook job. Don't want to discount the engineers, but going back to time to market, all right? So when everybody's at the table earlier, it allows the architect, the engineer, and if it is either a new building or a really serious reconfiguration of an existing building, which we see more and more, where the structural guy is involved, it allows the design to flow naturally the way that you build it. So you concentrate on those early activities first, with an understanding of what the final program should look like. But the way it flows out is that you're working and making construction documents, 85, 90, 95% documents on the foundations, on the steel, on the skin, on the facade, on the roof, on the mechanical backbones, on the vertical transportation. All that first stuff is in, and you're actively building it while the secondary design is going forward, which is more than just finishes. It is finishes, but it's also flow, it's partitions,
Right.
it's all that other stuff. And it allows you to be actively building a job before you're actively complete with the design. And it's a great advantage on the market. And, you know, it's just that silver bullet that we've seen on occasion that we got to find a way to expand that out and make it more, not attractive, but make everybody understand the advantages to it more clearly.
And understanding the owner's intent, right? If you think about the owner, there's the owner individuals that are who we interface with, but then they have their users behind them. How many times we've been 75% through a project, delighting the client who we interface, and then they bring in the users, and then the users had a different picture in their mind. Okay, now we're at a situation where there's a risk that our client will not be delighted. Bring them on too late in the process. We always have those discussions. Oh, you don't want to bring them too early because no one's going to make a decision. You never can get it going. You know, I think that's a bit of folly. I think having the complete collaborative team together, understanding the intent of the end user is just not the privy of the architect. Bring us all together. Whether you're paying us all in the beginning or not is irrelevant. Bring us all in there, and then we'll speed it up later on because we understand the intent. We have more confidence.